Hi everyone, this is Philip Murphy with SyncTask Software in New York City. I'm one of the founders of SyncTask Software. We're a SharePoint development firm, best known for our SharePoint project management templates and work in that space. I wanted to do a brief overview video for everyone today. I'm doing a SharePoint 2016 standalone installation on Windows Server 2012 R2. It's basically called single server farm installation in SharePoint 2016. It's not called standalone installation, but that's what a lot of people are know it by. So the reason why I wanted to record it is because a lot of information out there suggests that you cannot do a standalone installation in SharePoint 2016, and that's pretty much untrue. You can install SharePoint on a single server for development purposes. Basically, you don't want to run it in production, but you can do it for development on a single Windows Server 2012 R2 box. And I just wanted to go through how to do it so that you guys can do it for yourselves. So it's basically got 5 steps. The first one, we're going to rename the computer to something logical from the temporary name that Windows assigns to it. We are going to create a new primary partition on our hard disk to hold the database. Then we are going to install SQL Server. Next, we're going to create a domain controller. And finally, we're going to install SharePoint. And it's important to do these in order because you won't be able to install SQL Server if you create the domain controller first. So I think that's probably where people are running into problems when they're trying to do this. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we want to do is rename our computer to something logical. So we are going to click on the File Explorer box and we see something that says this PC. We're going to right click on that and click Properties. Okay, we're going to come down to this section here, Computer Name, Domain, and Workgroup Settings, and click on Change Settings. Okay, so we want to rename this computer, so we're going to click on Change, and we're going to rename it to something that makes sense for us. So we are going to type Sync Task Software. Okay, and now we're going to click OK. Whoops. Okay. NetBIOS is limited to 15 bytes, which is 15 characters. So what we're going to do, we're going to choose a different name here. Okay. Let's just choose Sync Task. Alright. It's just easier so it doesn't get cut off. And because we're going to need to remember this name. So what I want you to do is write down the name just so you have it for later, because you're probably going to need it. Okay, so let's click on OK, and we're going to click close, and it's going to restart our computer. And while our computer restarts, I'm going to pause the recording, and when it does restart, we're going to go on to the next task, which is to create a new primary partition to hold our database. Okay, so let's restart now and pause the recording. Okay, so now that we restarted our computer, let's make sure that our computer name has in fact changed. So let's click on the File Explorer folder there and right click on this PC, click on Properties, and we see that our computer name now has the new name that we assigned to it. Okay, so that's step one. Is renaming the computer. Step two now that we're going to do is we're going to create a new primary partition on our hard drive to host the database. And the reason why we want to do this is that sometimes database errors can create these huge log files and things, and we don't want that to overwhelm the hard disk partition that hosts our operating system. So we want to make sure that our server continues to run even if our database runs into a problem down the line. So what we're going to do here is go to Start, I believe it's Administrative Tools, Computer Management, and we want to, under the Storage section, we want to double click on Disk Management. And you see here we have one primary partition, about 200 gigabytes. So we want to basically split this in half and create a new primary partition to host the database. So what we're going to do is right click on this blue bar here, okay, and we want to click on Shrink Volume. And we're going to try to shrink this down basically to half. So we're just going to shrink it by, let's see, size of available shrink space. So let's see here. If we shrink 60, let's try 58,000 off of here. Whoops. We want a little more, actually, 100,000. Right? Okay. Alright, so we'll shrink it by 104,000. Let's see what we get. Okay, so it's roughly half. We'll just go with that for now, for these purposes. So we've shrunk down the primary partition. Now we've got unallocated space for our database over here. So we're going to right click on the black bar now, and we're going to click on New Simple Volume. And we're going to go through the wizard here. Just click Next. Don't change anything. We're going to fill up the whole space with the New Simple Volume. And we want to choose a drive letter for the new volume. So let's just say E for now. And make sure make sure this is NTFS. Okay, and we're going to do a quick format. So leave that box checked. Okay, and we're going to click Next. If you choose something other than NTFS, you're going to run into problems. So leave it NTFS. Okay, click Next and Finish. Okay, and we're going to wait one moment. Alright, you need to format it. So, okay, we're going to format. Okay, and there we go. We've got this healthy primary partition as our DB volume. Okay, X out of here. We already formatted it, but if you want to, you could format it again. It doesn't matter. Let's just do it to be safe. Okay, takes 2 seconds. Alright, so let's close that. Okay, so now we're going to pause the video, and the next step we are going to do is we're going to install SQL Server. Actually, we won't pause it yet. Let's double click on Install SQL Server, and then we'll pause it. Basically, I've got to hide the product key, so that will be a good place to pause. So let's double click on our SQL Server file, and in order to begin the setup, we're going to double click on the green setup icon there. And I just want to say we're using SQL Server Standard here, and as far as I know, they don't recommend installing SharePoint 2016 on SQL Server Express. So I've not actually tried to install it on SQL Server Express, and you're welcome to try it, but my understanding is that it's not recommended. So once you double click on the setup, you're going to click on installation here, and you're going to click on New SQL Server Standalone Installation. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video here. I'm going to click on that and forward through the first screen, which is the product key, and then we'll re-pick up the video from there. So we will pause and come right back. Okay, so what we did was we clicked on New SQL Server Standalone Installation or Add Features to an Existing Installation. The first screen was the product key, and the reason why I paused the video is that my product key is pre-filled in the file, and obviously I don't want to share that with the whole internet and get in all kinds of trouble with Microsoft. So the second screen here we have basically accept the license terms. We're not going to participate in the customer experience program simply because I just never do that. I don't really like sending usage information to companies. It's just my personal preference. You can click that box if you want to. Let's click next. So it's going to scan for some updates, etc. And then it will tell us any warnings. So there's Windows Firewall is active. We're going to leave it active, obviously. Click next. So what we're going to do is install all features with defaults and click on next. Okay, we're going to select all. Basically, when we do select all, it includes the reporting services add-in for SharePoint, which is not included by default. So we do want that in there. So we just clicked select all. And what we're going to do is we're going to leave the shared features on our C drive, and we're going to move the instance root directory to that new partition that we created. So this PC, and instead of C, we want to click on E. Okay, and we're going to click OK. And then we're going to click next. And this will begin the install process here. So let's see what we've got. So we're going to leave the default instance, and we're going to click next. Okay. Now we have got all of these services here listed out, and what we want to do here is go to the SQL Server agent startup type and switch it to automatic. And we want to switch these other services to automatic as well. Okay, and we're going to click on next. Okay, so we are going to use Windows Authentication Mode, and you want to make sure that there's a SQL Server Administrator specified down here. So right now we've got the Sync Test Software user specified as an administrator. That's the current user. You could also click on Add Current User, and it will automatically add whoever's logged in right now doing this wizard. Or you click Add to get a pop-up and put in the different usernames that you'd like to assign administrative roles to. But obviously you don't want to assign too many administrative roles because that becomes a security headache. So we've got Sync Test Software here. We're going to click next. Okay. Analysis Services Administrator. We're going to add the current user. Okay, there we go, and we're going to click next. Now, reporting services, you have the choice of installing and configuring the report server or just install only. So we're just going to say install and configure and click next. Okay. Users that have permissions for distributed replay controller, add current user. And as soon as that populates, we click next. Okay, specify controller machine name and directory locations. So we are going to type in that computer name that we typed in before, right here. Okay, and you can basically leave these paths here. Click next. Okay, and here it's going to give you the opportunity to verify all of the features that are going to be installed here, and give that a quick look and click install, and we should see the install process go through its to its completion momentarily. It takes a little while to install all the features, but um, I'm gonna keep this video running just so you can see how long it takes. And again, you always have to make sure that you install SQL Server before creating the domain controller, because if you actually create the domain controller first, you're not going to get this far. The install is going to fail. So um, please make sure that you're installing SQL Server before creating a domain controller. We haven't even gone through a domain controller creation yet in these videos, so you don't have to worry about it. But um, if you're just thinking of the order in which you need to do things, this needs to come before domain controller. So it's certainly not a fast process, but um, I thought about pausing the video, but I'd really like you guys to see how long it takes. So I'm going to leave it running for a little while. I apologize for all the horns in the background, but I'm in New York City and I just can't avoid it. Not sure if you can hear that on the recording or not. So this install bar is kind of limping along here, and hopefully it will complete soon. And I believe it requires a restart after installing this. I'm not positive, but we're going to restart the computer anyway, just to it's just a good idea to do it after doing a big install like SQL Server or SharePoint or anything really. So we'll be doing that after this installs all the way. And one of the reasons why I like to let the video run through this whole thing is in case anything fails, I want everybody to be able to see where it fails and then, see the fix for the failure. So, especially with SQL Server and SharePoint, a lot of times it really helps to see the point of failure if there is one. So that's kind of another reason why we're letting this run on the video. And obviously, if you don't want to watch this far, just fast forward to, a minute before the end of the video. And we're not going to be doing anything on this segment except for installing SQL Server and restarting the computer. This is one of the tough things about being a database administrator or an IT professional. Um, it doesn't affect me because I'm a founder of the company here, but you know, I know for a lot of people in IT, their bosses don't understand how long it takes to install things. So that's another reason why I wanted to let this run on the video. Um, just so if somebody says to you, "Hey, what are you doing? You're not working," you can say, "Hey, look, this is how long it takes. Nothing I can do about it." So my employees are a little bit luckier because I have an IT background and I know how long it takes to do these things, so I don't hammer them for um, not doing anything when they're installing big pieces of software like this. I want them focused on what they're doing. So, um, but at any rate, if you're an IT pro and you're watching this, then maybe you can use this to help you if you got one of those bosses who are hammering you for waiting while software installs. And I think um, SharePoint, or I'm sorry, SQL Server Enterprise, I believe has an option to just install um, the features that you need for SharePoint. I believe it's Enterprise has that, but I don't know what the licensing difference is in terms of cost between standard and Enterprise. But I believe from previously installing SQL Server Enterprise, there is an option on that to do a SharePoint specific installation rather than having to install all the default features or choose them individually. I think there's some sort of wizard on that license version of SQL Server that lets you do it simply for SharePoint. But I don't recall the install time being significantly different. I think it was a pretty lengthy install time on both of them actually. So, but we're almost there. Appreciate your patience. And like I said, if you don't want to wait through all this, just fast forward to 1 minute before the video is scheduled to end, and you'll be fine. But this is really just for everybody to see the full installation process here. This is a tough one. I'm happy you guys are hanging in here if you still are. I really would love to speed this up. But, now it looks like they're on to installing tools, so it should be almost done. And we have to remember it's a pretty big install, so it's kind of par for the course. We're moving a lot quicker now at the end here, so whoa, that was quite a long install here. It's finishing up the last little pieces, but wow, okay. I've got my fingers crossed here. It looks like a successful installation is going to happen, so that's going to be pretty awesome. Come on, let's go. So they're tricking me a little bit here with this full bar, and they're still installing it, but it's almost done. Um, I'm just waiting for the message to pop that the installation was a success, and then we're going to restart the computer, and we're going to go on to the domain controller piece. Um, Man, I really want to speed this up. So I apologize for the dead air on the video. I just kind of made a decision that it would be best to leave it running for the entire install, just so everyone could get an idea of what's supposed to happen, and compare that to their own experience. Or if we ran into an error, maybe it would be a popular failure point, and we could do an on-air fix. So that's why I kind of let it go running for this entire time. So right now it's taking a little longer because we chose to configure the reporting services and install instead of just install. So I think that's what it's doing right now, is it's doing the reporting services configuration so that it can be used immediately. So I think that's why they give you the option to install only or configure and install. But we've gotten this far, so hopefully this will finish momentarily. And a lot of people outside of IT, don't understand this, and it's frustrating to us because we want to do our jobs, and we want to be productive and all that. But like when you're faced with an installation that takes this long, it's hard for people to actually believe that. So, um, but it's part of the job. So you see, it's doing the configurations here. So hopefully it'll be done shortly. They need a secondary progress bar or something for the configuration piece, because we've been at a full bar for a couple minutes now. It looks like it's wrapping up. All right, sweet. So we got through that. Now we're just waiting here for the little report to tell us what succeeded and what didn't. And it looks like everything succeeded, thankfully. So, wow, that took a long time. I appreciate you hanging in there with me. Um, I really wanted to keep this uh, on the video just so that everybody would have a frame of reference in case there was a failure on their end, um, or a failure on our end, and they could see the fix. So I apologize that took so long, but we succeeded in installing it all. So awesome. So we're going to close that, and now we're going to close the installation center, and we're going to close out our other windows, and we're going to restart, and then we are going to create our domain controller in the next section. Okay, so power restart. Someone else. Okay, so there's an administrator account logged in. We're just going to restart anyway. Okay. Okay, so now that we've got SQL Server installed and we've restarted, we want to go ahead and create our domain controller. So we're going to open up the server manager. So that opens up by default usually when you restart the server, but if it doesn't, click on this icon right here and get the server manager. We're going to go to local server, and we're going to scroll down a little bit until we see this roles and features section. Then under tasks, we're going to go to add roles and features. Click next, and we want role-based or feature-based installation. Okay, we're going to choose this computer because we're installing this on a single server. Okay, and what we want to do is click on Active Directory Domain Services, click on Add Features, and click on Next. Okay, whoops. Okay, and we are going to keep clicking Next through here. Okay, it tells us additional things that will be installed. Click on Next. Okay. Right, and it looks like we can go ahead and click install. If you want to restart the server automatically, you can click it there. We're just going to leave that unclicked right now, and we're going to click install. So once this is done, we should get a little message that pops up in our server manager, and probably on this little wizard too, to promote this machine. So let's see what we get here. So configuration required, installation succeeded. Okay, so we click on close, then we're going to come back into the server manager, and you see we've got this little yellow flag here. Click on that, and you see post deployment configuration, promote this server to a domain controller. So we're going to click on that. Okay, now what we're going to do here is we're going to add a new forest. Okay, and we're going to specify the domain for this operation. So you could type in whatever you want. We're going to type in sync task software dot local. Okay, and we're going to click on next. So somewhere we might get a propagation error, but that's fine because this is just a local domain that we're putting in. So let's see here. Since we're on 2012 R2, we're going to leave those just as they are. We're going to leave everything else as they are, and we're going to put in a directory services restore mode password, which is required. And make sure it's a complex password with a capital letter and lowercase letter and some numbers and one special character. Otherwise, I believe this wizard will fail. So put in a strong password there. Click next. So there's our propagation error. That's fine. Just X out of that. Okay, and we're going to click next. Here it's going to give us the NetBIOS name assigned to the domain. You can change it if necessary. You just have to wait for that to propagate. I'm just going to change it to something a little bit shorter. Okay. Already being used. Alright. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to leave it at what it was. It has to be 15 characters. I'll just leave it at that. Sync test soft war. Probably because somebody was doing some other experiments on this computer. That's why it's already taken. So it doesn't really matter what you have in that spot. So we're going to leave all the defaults here and click next. Okay. And click next. And it's verifying prerequisites. Okay. We can ignore these for now. Okay, we're going to click install, and once the computer restarts, we're going to pause the recording and come back and do the final piece of this, which is the SharePoint installation. So click on install. Don't worry about that. And we just have to remember we're doing this standalone install, so a lot of these error messages are going to be a problem if you're not doing a standalone install on a local domain. If you're trying to do like an actual non-local domain, but we're doing this standalone install on a local domain, so we just ignore these errors. And when I say local domain, I mean synctestsoftware.local. It's not a fully qualified domain name like synctestsoftware.com. So it's basically a name that we made up for the purpose of creating the domain controller. Okay, so we're going to click on close, and it's going to restart us. And when it restarts us, we're going to pause the recording. Okay. Okay, so now that we've restarted, we see that we are now a domain controller. We see this ADDS is now here. And what we're going to do now is try to install SharePoint 2016. Okay, so we double click on the SharePoint install file, and then we want to find, let's see here, I believe it's this auto run. No, where is it? Sorry, it's Splash here. I want to double click on the Splash file. Okay. And this should pull up the prerequisite installer. Okay, so we see we've got all of these different options here. We want to click on Install Software Prerequisites. Okay, click on Yes, you allow. Okay, and it's going to check the computer for all of these different prerequisites and install the ones that you don't have. So let's click Next. I'm sure we have some of those on here. Some of them we don't probably, but it's going to install the ones that we don't have. Let's click Next. So it's going to make changes to roles, etc., to handle SharePoint, and it's going to install the prerequisites, and then we can get onto the business of installing SharePoint Server directly. So I don't believe a restart is required after the prerequisites are installed. Depending on what you get installed in your particular machine, there may be one required, but it will tell you. So we're just going to see what it tells us here. Okay, so installation complete. Prerequisites have been installed or enabled. Let's click Finish. Okay, now for the big moment, we're going to click on Install SharePoint Server. We're going to click on Yes. We will allow it. Okay. So we're going to wait until we get this product key message. Now I'm going to pause the recording to put in my product key and get to the next screen. So one moment, please. Okay, so now that we entered our product key, we can go ahead and accept the license terms and continue with the installation. And I just want to say that we are installing SharePoint Server Standard. Depending on your product key, you could also install SharePoint Server Enterprise. Usually we like to develop on the lowest license available for the year. So, and the reason for that is that if we develop templates on the lowest license, then they will also be compatible with higher licenses. So, for example, in 2013, we developed templates using SharePoint Foundation and then tested them on SharePoint Server and Server Enterprise, because basically with code you can develop on the lowest license, and have robust functionality just using your own code. So that's kind of how we like to do it. So for templates anyway, for obviously for special projects we develop on any license that the client may want us to develop on. So at any rate, depending on your product key, you can install different license versions. Here we are installing SharePoint Server Standard here, and there is no more SharePoint Foundation, so there's no more free on-premises SharePoint licenses. If you don't have a large budget, I would suggest signing up for SharePoint Online through Office 365 if you need a low-cost solution. Obviously that's in the cloud, it's not on site though. So let's go ahead with this installation. Click Continue. We're going to leave the default directories and click Install Now. And we will monitor this progress here. It can take a significant amount of time to install SharePoint, but we'll see how long it takes. If it starts to go too long, we'll pause the video, but for now I'll try to leave it running and see what kind of progress we see. So the next step will be to run the products configuration wizard, I believe it's called. It basically sets up SharePoint once it's installed. It connects to the database and assigns ports for central admin and things like that. So we shouldn't run into any problems because we did everything in the right order here, and did it pretty meticulously as well. So I don't anticipate any problems, but we will see. I'll definitely leave the recording running for the entire configuration wizard process, because that does have feedback throughout in terms of what it's actually doing. This doesn't have a lot of feedback. It says installing Microsoft SharePoint, and it stays like that until it says finishing up installation or something to that effect, and it stays like that for a little while. So the value of leaving this running is not very great. So I may just pause it at some point if it starts to take too long, and then come back for the configuration wizard portion. But we'll see. We'll leave it on for a couple minutes and see if we get any progress on the bar. Um, if not, we'll pause it. And sometimes it does kind of get stuck at this point, and then kind of for a little while, and then it just pops to the end. But um, maybe a minute or two longer, and if it doesn't start to really move, we'll pause it and then come back when the configuration wizard is ready to run. But basically, you'll see this screen, and then you'll see something that says, I believe it says finalizing SharePoint installation. This may take a few minutes, something to that effect. That'll be the next um, message you see right here, but you won't see any other feedback besides this. So it's kind of tricky because you can start to believe that the installation might be hanging or stuck, but it's actually just, it just doesn't provide you with a lot of feedback while it's installing. So I think what we're going to do is pause the recording until we get to the installation complete point and ready to run the configuration wizard. So we will be right back. Thank you so much. Okay, so that took about 5.5, 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, something like that, for the SharePoint to install on the server. And now we get this run the SharePoint products configuration wizard now, which is really where people run into problems with SharePoint, in addition to installing the domain controller and SQL Server, etc. But let's go ahead and run that. So we're going to click close, leave that clicked, and we're going to click next. Okay, now click yes, and what we're going to do is create a new server farm. Okay, now remember we're installing this on one we're installing this on one computer. So the database server here is going to be the computer name. So in case you forgot, you can click on the File Explorer, right click on this PC and choose Properties. Okay, and we see the computer name here is Sync Task. So that will be your database server. Okay, now the now we need a domain username and a password. So our domain username will be the account name. So if you previously had, let's say, sync task slash sync task software, that should, well, let's try it. Let's try sync task, okay, slash sync task software. That was the name that we had for our user, and I believe it gets converted to a domain username. So let's try it out and see what we get. Valid domain account. So here's what we have to do. Sync test software. Okay. The domain, let's try this. This is the first time I've done this. So sync task software dot local would be the domain. Okay? Right here. And then sync task software is the name of the user. Let's try that one. Cool. There we go. Okay, so you get the domain on the computer description here, synctestsoftware.local, and so you put a backward slash, and then the username that you're signed in on. So if you're signed in on administrator, you would do that. So if we're signed in on SyncTask Software, so that's why we put that there. Okay, so the domain that you put in first, though, is this information right here. Okay. Next. And then we need to put in a new passphrase for the farm security. So we're just going to go over here, put one in, and you're going to have to type it twice to confirm it. Okay. Click next. Now what we want to do here, we get to specify server role. We want to do single server farm. Okay. This allows us to create everything on the same server. Okay, so and really, like it says, development and testing. I wouldn't recommend using this in production. Okay, because you're just probably not going to have enough resources on a single box. So this is how we achieve the standalone installation, basically, from previous years. It's a little more complicated, obviously, but let's click next and hope for the best as we go through the familiar configuration wizard. So we are going to go, we'll just leave that port number there. NTLM is what we're going to go with. Okay. Let's just review that. Looks good. Here we go. Come on, let's go. We're going to really hope for the best and hope that there's no failures here and that we've got SharePoint up and running and that this thing opens up central admin and that we can end this video with a successful installation. I appreciate all your patience on this, bearing with me through these videos. It's a little bit tricky installing SharePoint as a standalone installation now, but hopefully we did it. And we are going to wait through this configuration wizard. We're not going to pause it because we really want to see the different steps that it goes through because it gives us feedback at each step on this one. I really hope this helps somebody out there who's been struggling to get this on a standalone server. It's really just a matter of going through the steps in the right order. So I'm going to be happy if this wizard completes with no errors. That would be great. But really, if you didn't do the SQL Server first and the computer name and the domain controller, all that stuff, if you didn't do it in the right order, you wouldn't even get to this point. So even just getting to this point feels like a victory. They've certainly made it a lot tougher to install SharePoint on a single server. And they've made it a lot tougher for the small business or casual user to do it, because a lot of people aren't going to mess with creating a domain controller and stuff like that. They're just going to go sign up for SharePoint Online. So I'm hoping that this helps somebody. And this, should look familiar to anybody who's installed SharePoint before. This particular um, part of the process, the configuration wizard, it's pretty standard moving forward from here now. I'm just going to close some windows here. So it's taking a little while, but I really don't want to turn it off. I'd rather let you guys see this. And, obviously, you're done. If you don't want to watch the rest of it, basically what's going to happen is it's going to say configuration is complete, and it's going to give you the option to launch central administration, and you can just click, launch central administration or whatever. Um, and I believe your primary SharePoint site is going to be that domain. So whatever it was, ours is synctestsoftware.local. So if you put that in, that should be your primary SharePoint site on port 80. Oh, there we go. We're already on step 6. So you know what? Let's just test it out as soon as we get to through step 10 here. But I do believe that if we put in that domain, that will be our primary SharePoint site. That gets created in the installation. And obviously, or I guess it would be a web application, but you can create new sites and applications, etc., like you normally would. But the port 81, I believe, it's just you put in the domain that you created. So for us, it would be synctestsoftware.local. But we'll test it out just to make sure. And hopefully the time that it takes on your server may vary based on whether you're using a virtual machine or not, and how much memory you've committed to it, etc. um, Obviously, if you're using a physical box with 16 gigabytes of memory, you're going to have better performance than this virtual machine with 4 gigabytes assigned to it. So um, at any rate, it should be done momentarily. So what happened? Failed to provision central administration web application. And we've got a log. Let's see. So let's try it again on a different port. See if that helps. Let's go to, no, it's not desktop. Products configuration. Try it again. Sometimes it just fails. I mean, honestly. So here, we'll do this different. That's a different port. Okay. So here's what we got to do. We got to go delete that site now because it did create the site. So these are like quirky things that happen in SharePoint. I'm kind of glad it happened just so that in case you get the error, you'll be able to fix it. Let's go to Internet Information Services. Click here. No right now on that. We're going to click the down arrow here. Click on Sites. And then Central Admin. Click on that. And then we're going to right click on it and remove it. Yes, we're sure. Okay. I don't think we need to restart IIS, but we'll find out in a minute. Okay, we don't. So there we go. It could have just timed out. I mean, I'm not really sure what happened there. But, obviously, if central admin fails, then we've got to, figure that out. We went and deleted the website using IIS, and then we're running the configuration wizard again, and we'll see what happens. There we go. Hey, it worked. We got past that point. Yeah, it's so quirky. So, at any rate, I'm glad that happened because then you get to see some of the weird stuff that happens, uh, when we run this wizard here. So, if you get something like that, basically you just go to Internet Information Services, IIS, and delete the central admin site and then rerun it, if it fails on that. So, great. There we go. So, we're going to finish and it's going to launch us into central admin. Okay, so I just want to say for your local site, it's just going to be http:// and then the computer name. So that's what it looks like anyway at the top. So sync task software. Okay. Let's see if we get logged in. And you're going to have to do some configuration once you get in to central admin. But look, there we are. We're in. Okay. So just go through those things there. Then you have the option of configuring it using a wizard or doing it yourself. So let's just come over to this other tab and just type in http:// and then the computer name. I believe that will launch our port 80 site. Okay, so we don't actually have a site configured yet. So, because we haven't gone through the wizard here. So, but yes, this is your port 80 site. So when you configure the farm and you create a site on port 80, it'll just be basically your machine name. So, all right. So that's as far as we're going to go here. We got SharePoint up and running on a single server. and we had a nice error on the configuration wizard, and we fixed it. And um, it's a long set of videos here, but I hope it helps you. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments below. Um, and thanks for watching, and I hope you all have a great day. Okay, thanks. Bye.